Good evening. I'm Channing Leonard, and it's my pleasure to guest host, filling in for Darius Hillman. In each and every sense of the phrase, my guest is a true Renaissance man. Throughout the course of his life, he's been a valedictorian, environmental scientist, impromptu photojournalist, and nonprofit founder, among many other monikers. But, perhaps most impressively, for more than the past half-century, he has compiled one of the most impressive collections of African diasporic art in Chicago and the nation. A son of Chicago's South Side, he parlayed a successful career as a scientist in the EPA to finance his world travels and now legendary art collection. 20 years ago, he paid it forward by founding Diasporal Rhythms, a nonprofit focused on cultivating a deep appreciation and love for art from the African diaspora. Please join me and the incomparable Patric McCoy in the arena right now.
Here we go! Three, two.
Patric, thank you so much for joining. I know it's going to be a great conversation between you and I today.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So let's get into some of the basics here. So in the beginning, when and where were you born?
I was born in Chicago on the South Side on 63rd Street. My mother was dragging a Christmas tree down 63rd Street with my older brother in her hand, 9 months pregnant. And so when she got to the second floor, because we lived above a drugstore, she got to the second floor, her water broke and I popped out. So I was born on 63rd Street.
Just like that, huh? So what was the South Side like back in those days?
My growing up on the South Side was electric, and it was a phenomenal place. It was the experience of living in a black city that was inside of a city. We were at the nexus of almost every important thing that has now come to be understood, started in Chicago. All of the music, the arts, everything was going on the South Side of Chicago, and 63rd Street was the sort of the center of it when I was coming up in the 50s and the 60s.
Kind of that evokes the emotions of the black metropolis that we read about, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was really what Harlem says that, you know, they were the Renaissance. Chicago was really the nexus of all of that. And in fact, there's a lot of books that have been written about the fact that most of the luminaries that we now look at from the Harlem Renaissance actually came from Chicago and had already done their thing in Chicago and then decided to go to New York.
Absolutely. I'm all here for fueling the New York-Chicago rivalry. Ride or die for Chicago, absolutely. So where did you attend school?
I went to schools right in the neighborhood. You know, back then we were stuck. You had to go to the district school. So for high school, I went to Inglewood High School because I lived right on the other side of the boundary for Hyde Park High School. And I don't know if you know that Hyde Park High School and Inglewood High School have the oldest high school rivalry in the country. So we still, even today, at 70-something years, I still look at the people from Hyde Park High School with the jaundiced eye.
Give them a little side eye there.
Yeah.
So did that get you interested in your studies of environmental science?
I got that from my grandmother. We would go to visit and stay with her during the summers. You know, Chicago at the time was a serious urban environment, and the black community was really intense with housing and so forth. So my mother would always send us away, and we'd go to Michigan, where my grandmother had a sort of a little small farm and so forth. And she was, I'm now looking back on it, she was very environmentally conscious, and she would take us out into the woods and show us all kinds of things. So I was already being programmed to pay attention to the environment even when I was as a child.
That seems pretty ahead of its time. Obviously, that was way before it's in vogue, and we're kind of understanding of the climate crisis.
I would think it's actually a sort of a lack of recognition of just who we are. So black people are from the earth, and so many of people that came to Chicago were one generation away from being in farms. So we were connected to the environment in a way that I think has been very helpful for me in my career, because I was already understood it. I had an appreciation. It wasn't foreign, and to be involved in trying to protect it was just natural. It was natural.
And so I got to know what it was like to be a black scientist at the EPA in the 80s. Like, what was that experience like for you?
Oh, there's a bunch of different lines to approach that. Number one, my name is Patric McCoy, and so everybody thought I was Irish. So that was the thing. And then the other is that I had graduated from the University of Chicago, and so that I didn't realize had a lot of cachet, is that you're supposed to be super heavy. So there was a deference that here's this black guy that's a scientist from the University of Chicago. So I didn't realize it, I had some swag, and I used it, because I was pretty aggressive. And I was in the part of the Environmental Protection Agency that dealt with enforcement. So you have to be, you got to have some inf when you're trying to push that stuff. I'm trying to be
It's a family show.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's what I was searching for, the good word. But no, it was perfect for me. It was perfect for me. I was able to be aggressive and take the sort of the learning that I had gotten from 63rd Street, from being in the black, is that you're not scared. And in this world, working as a scientist, I was working with Fortune 500 companies that were accustomed to getting their way, and with people just bowing down and so forth. And I wasn't having it. I'm looking right at the law, and the law says you have to do this. And I would tell them that. So I got a reputation in there, became a national expert, because I wasn't afraid of them. I wasn't afraid of them. And there was nothing for me to lose. You ain't gonna give me a job anyway.
So just like your grandmother, you're ahead of your time also.
Yeah.
So fast forward 40 years to 2023. What's your take on the current environmental justice conversations happening and the state of just the overall climate crisis? Do you think we have hope?
To be honest, no. Is that we were identifying the problem back in the 1980s, and that's the time when the societies, all of them across the planet, should have been starting to work on these things. So we don't have hope for the present way that we do things. That's going to change, and it's going to change dramatically. Just what we saw last week, New York's flooded. That's going to happen more and more and more. Miami is flooded, Florida is flooded. That's going to just keep happening. So there's no hope for maintaining the way we've done things. There's hope for human beings to shift and make some adjustments, but it is still, are you going to do this or not? Because we've already had, from the comic books with Superman, I always think back on it, the lesson, the origin story is on Krypton, and they knew that the thing was getting ready to blow. And they could not get together to make the decisions to help. So the story is already out there. We know what, if we don't do anything, it's going to be changed. It's going to come loose.
Let's all hope for everyone's sake that we can do something pretty dramatic.
The young people give me courage, and because there are many more younger people that are seeing it in a different light than even my generation, because they're seeing how real it is to them.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
But something more sort of hopeful. Obviously, your career helped you finance world travel and I think upwards of 1,000 pieces of art. So I want to hear a little bit about your collection. That's what I'm really interested in.
Well, let's peel back your statement. I did have a job, and it did give me some spending money to do some travel. The travel I did was sort of a reflection of my curiosity about life. It was not about getting art. So most people think, oh, you went all the way to the ends of the earth to get all this artwork. I have now, and I have over 1,000. I've got more like 1,400 pieces
wow.
in my house. But the important thing is that 90% of it I got from Chicago. And 90% of it is from African-American artists, African-American artists in this city. So when I get the praises or so forth about my collection, I'm really saying this is really a reflection, a praise to Chicago, of that it has been such a cultural fountain for phenomenal work by a large numbers of people, artists, that we are basically not giving them the full credit that is due. In fact, it led to me co-founding the organization Diaspora Rhythms, is that we're overlooking the reality of just how rich the culture is that we and especially Black people. Our culture is very, very rich. We tend to point our vision to this larger culture and think that we fall short because we're not that, instead of looking just how just phenomenally rich we are. My collection is based on artists here in the neighborhood. They lived around in the same neighborhood I lived in, and they're doing phenomenal work. Most of Chicago has no knowledge of them. Yet when you come and see my collection, you're like, wow.
Yeah.
Where'd you get this one? And again, they think, oh, you went to the ends of the earth to get this. And I've said, no, I just walked down the street, you know?
Yeah.
Like, so the problem is that we have so many misconceptions about the visual arts, well, culture, period, but definitely in the visual arts, of elitism. We buy into this elitist concept that only the super, super, super rich can have anything of any value. And I'm here to tell you, I did work, but I wasn't making no money. I mean, really, and nobody died and left me anything. So I've been working all my life.
Yeah.
And so I've always worked, acquired art through a salary that was kind of normal. But most people think that artwork is so expensive, and I'm thinking, no, I wouldn't have 1,400 pieces if it was expensive. Is that it's well within the reach of the average person. Really, really, really good pieces, and you don't have to take on these elitist concepts to be an art collector. One is that you have to be rich, but the second one is that you have to be private, and you have to be all security conscious that people are going to steal your work if they come by and see what you got. And I'm thinking, that's not true. When I lived in South Shore, my apartment was broken into 5 times. They ain't stole no books, they ain't stole no paintings. All during, that is not what people steal. So that was a mistake, a misconception that art is something that if you can't show it to anybody because they might take it. The third thing is that people say you have to have a knowledge about art in order to be an art collector. And I keep reminding them, I studied chemistry. I did not study art. So I'm not a student of art. And I am not encyclopedic. I don't know everybody in the world about art because that's not necessary. It's not necessary for you to know anything. As long as you are not blind, you can appreciate art. All you do is just look at it. And if it moves you, it touches you, and you now want to get it, you become an art collector. You don't have to know anything. And I remind people, because all of us are music collectors. Everybody collects some kind of music. And we never, ever put as a barrier that you have to know anything about music.
That's right.
To collect it, to love it, to be a critic of it. You don't have to know a damn thing.
That's right. Yeah.
So
I love that, because I never seriously considered your collection to be it's essentially a love letter to Black Chicago artists, which I think is just, and obviously you live your truth as far as letting the community into your home to see your collection. So what advice would you offer to a fledgling art collector like myself?
A fledgling art collector is anybody. That's just anybody. And all you have to do is see things that you like. And if you like them and you ask if it's for sale and you can afford it, and you buy it, you're an art collector. That's all it is. I had to make that recognition that I did that back in 1968 when I was in college, and I'm studying chemistry. My roommate is an art major, and he comes back from class with a lithograph that he's done in class. And I looked at it and said, oh, I like that. And he said, it's a lithograph, and I said, I don't know what that is.
I wouldn't either.
So he explained the process to me, and I said, oh. And then I said, are you selling this? Now, this is 1968.
Yep.
Nobody has any money, and I definitely don't have any. And so why am I asking if he's selling it? Because I ain't got no money. And so we agreed that it would cost $10. And I scraped up that $10, and I bought it, and I have it. Even today, I still have that same piece. It's always near my front door, because it's the first thing. And once, 20 years, 30 years later, I was debating this concept of what is an art collector, and I realized that's when I became an art collector. I just saw something I liked, and I bought it. That was it.
It's as simple as that.
It's as simple as that.
That's all it takes to
That's
demystify.
all it is. There's nothing more complex. Why do you want to complexify a very simple thing?
Yeah, we tend to do that too much. Right? So Patrick, you're often known as this legendary art collector, but you've certainly had this renaissance for the photography that you've done in the 80s, or in a real unique time in our history. So can you talk about kind of having your own personal art be placed in the spotlight? And it's brilliant art in its own right.
Yeah, it's a fluke.
I don't think so.
I call myself an inadvertent photojournalist.
Okay.
I grew up in a family with paintings and photography. Was all around him because my father, he was a frustrated artist and photographer. So I always had them in my world. And then found out that my grandmother, at the turn of the century, back in the 19-teens and 1920s, she would go around with a little camera and just take a gazillion pictures. So it's been in the blood, you know. But I didn't want to do like my father, because he was real technical with it, you know, and I didn't want to do that. But I'd been talked into getting a 35 millimeter camera. This is in the mid 80s. And I've been talked into getting one because people had seen that I was shooting these little point and shoot cameras, and I was just taking lots and lots of pictures, very similar to what my grandmother had done 50 years earlier. And so I decided I wasn't going to ask my father, or I wasn't going to take any classes. I was going to teach myself photography. And I wrote out a commitment on my birthday in 1984 to take this camera with me everywhere I went for a whole year. And that I was going to take at least one picture every day of that year. And then I wrote, if anybody asked me to take their picture, I was going to stop what I was doing and take their picture. Now, why I wrote that down, I have no idea. Who asked people to take their picture? Okay, guess what? I was working for the EPA at that time, and I was commuting to work on a bicycle, because that's my other passion. And so I was riding a bicycle from South Shore to the Loop every day. And sometimes I'd ride along the lake shore, then other times I'd ride through the neighborhood, because after a while, you just get sick of seeing the same trees, you know, on the lake. So I would go through the neighborhoods. So as I'm going through the neighborhoods with this camera hanging off my neck, riding a bike, people in the street would holler out at me, take my picture. I couldn't believe it. And I would stop and have to take a picture. So that went on and on and on and on. And then when I would get to the downtown area, there was a little club I used to go to, the Rialto, and I would go in there, and I wasn't going in there to be a photographer, but people would see the camera and they would again say, hey, take my picture. So we'd go outside. So I ended up taking thousands and thousands of pictures of a time period in the mid 80s, which is a very interesting time period for Black people in Chicago. So many things were coming into confluence that created a whole set of young Black men being in the loop and being available and situational. So I captured that era, and that era led to the AIDS epidemic, the crack epidemic, so forth. So I was catching these people prior to those calamities happening. didn't think anything about it, put the negatives in a box for 30 years. And then in 2016, by a fluke, somebody was asking about who was taking pictures in the 1980s because there was a show, Art AIDS America, that they wanted to have in Chicago, and they didn't have any black participation. And it was at a cocktail party, and I said, well, I took some pictures in the 1980s. They said, you did? I'm like, yeah. I said, can we see them? So they came by, saw the pictures, and 5 of them were put into the show. I was like shocked, like, whoa. And subsequently, they told me that I needed to do something with these photographs and do a book. So in the process, I asked 659 Wrightwood if they would support a book. They said, no, but we can give you a show.
Brilliant show at that.
So I got to show about 52 of my paintings. It got a lot of press, so I became kind of a star photographer for a minute, which is what they said you have there 15 minutes of fame. And it has led to a recognition that I was actually a photojournalist.
Yeah.
Even though I did not intend to do that. I have a subsequent show coming up this month, October 14th. It opens at Blanc Gallery, called At First Glance, because it's a kind of a continuation of the show that was at Wrightwood, which is called Take My Picture.
Yeah.
So it's going to be an expansion of that whole time period and bringing out many more photographs, because I took pictures during that time of everything and everybody.
Yeah. And Take My Picture was brilliant, so I can't wait to see what's in store for the Blanc. But before we close, I do want to make sure that we talk just a little bit about VMR, the Visible Man Review, which is the all-black male book club that you and I have gotten to know each other in.
Yes.
So real quick, why do you think it's important for us to cultivate and hold those types of spaces?
Well, it's super important for black men to talk to each other. Is that I'm a senior. I've been through growing up in Chicago. I've been to the pool halls and to the barbershops and to the basketball courts and the baseball diamonds and the locker rooms, and I've heard black men talk nonsense, absolute garbage when we talking to each other. Now, I understand that women, when they get together, they actually talk about things. So it was so refreshing to be in this book club. One, that black men actually do read, but then we can talk about things that are not just garbage, real issues, real from the heart, and real analysis, and different points of view. I found it just so refreshing and so meaningful to be a part of that. I'm gung-ho for it. And I feel like we should have more and more situations where black men are able to talk to each other.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. And Patric, thank you sincerely for making time to join me in conversation and community right now. We'll be right back with 3 for the Road.
What's up, Chicago? I'm Darius Caffey, and I invite you to join me for a new episode of The Table on Air with special guest, award-winning songwriter, Jess Logan. Take a look.
That's how I strive to live my life, is just always be myself, regardless of what room I go into, just show my soul.
Join the conversation with us on Tuesday, October 31st at 7:30 p.m. on CAN-TV Cable, Channel 19, streaming on cantv.org, and available on the CAN-TV Plus app. Experience the power of community television.
I'm Hugo Alta, host of the podcast 3 Questions With. Mentors play an essential role by stepping up in their communities to support teens and helping them achieve personal, academic, and professional goals. Meeting the Moment is Big Brothers Big Sisters of Metropolitan Chicago.
A mentor is not only just for them to guide them and give them that extra support, but to also help them in finding resources.
Join us on Wednesdays at 7:30 in the evening via Channel 19, streaming on cantv.org and the CAN-TV Plus app.
All right, Patric, before we get out of here, I have 3 for the road. First question is, if you could have dinner with anybody, living or dead, who would you choose and why?
Dessalines.
Who's that?
Dessalines. He was number 2 after Toussaint Louverture and the Haitian Revolution. He was a brilliant and very effective military person in the revolution, but he created this constitution for man that is just amazing when you read it. He would be the person I would want to talk to.
You answered that real quick. I'll have to read up on him. I'm not as familiar. Second question is, do you have any regrets?
Regrets in life?
Generally.
Period? No, not. I had a conversation with myself when I was about 19, and on that subject area, guilt and regret. And I said I wasn't going to have that. I could do things, make mistakes, and so forth, but I was not going to regret and nor have guilt.
Yeah, well, I live with that stress, right? So, final question: what piece of advice would present-day Patric McCoy give your 21-year-old self?
What would I give myself? Oh, well, I would love to travel more, read more, even though I was reading voraciously. But basically, that's it, because the money thing, I ain't feeling that one. You know, in a sense like, oh, I should have made more money. The experiences I have were priceless. But I would like to have more information and definitely like more experiences in seeing other parts of the world.
So I'm going to cheat and actually maybe ask one or two more questions. So obviously we're talking about VMR. So I want to hear, you know, we've been in a couple years we've been doing that book club. So what's been your favorite book that we've read?
Favorites are hard for me to come up with because I enjoy the moment, and so it's hard. People ask me what's my favorite piece in my collection. I say, you got to be kidding. But I liked Binga. I liked Things Fall Apart. And I liked the book we did with the church ladies, the Secret Life of the Church Ladies. I love
anthology book.
It's the conversations that come after it that I find are so fascinating. The books themselves I enjoy, but I look forward to hearing how other people interpret what I just read, and that's what's exciting to me. Even the books that I don't particularly care for, I find that the conversation is interesting.
And you'll tell us if you don't care for it.
I really will.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, what book are you going to put in to kind of for us to vote on? Because that's our process to vote.
That's right. In fact, I just changed my recommendation from The Third Life of Grange Copeland, which was done by Alice Walker, to A Lesson Before Dying by Ernest Gaines.
Great book.
I really would like to have us talk about that.
Yeah, great book. So Patric, thank you again for joining me in the arena and sharing your leadership journey. And thank you, Chicago and beyond, for tuning in. And let me leave you with one final thought for the road, courtesy of the great Toni Morrison. Freeing yourself was one thing. Claiming ownership of that freed self was another. Until next time, take good care. Good night.